my name is Rebecca Kinzer. I did my final paper on comparing and contrasting the lives, the power, the wealth, the fame, and the beauty of the portrait of Marilyn Monroe and the bust of Nefertiti. In this project for honors, I'm hoping to touch on those a little bit more and also bring in another source to make the information more valuable, so that way I can describe to you guys what the desirable positions were throughout time and how the creators of these artworks used those in order to create fame for themselves, as well as create it as a desire for the people who view their artwork. I'm doing my video like this because I really wanted to create a PowerPoint, but I could not figure out how to get the voiceover on the PowerPoint, so I just decided to combine them both into one and create a YouTube video while I was showing off my PowerPoint. So here we go. The Bust of Nefertiti, that was the first artwork that I described. This was commanded to be created by Thutmose by King Akhenaten. That's a really hard word to say. King Akhenaten, during his time, he was credited for changing a lot of the religion around him, and he was a very powerful warlike figure and king. He wanted to help show off some of his power through the bust of Nefertiti, so he ordered his artist, Thutmose, to create this sculpture. Now, Nefertiti, she was an image of beauty, of power, and of wealth during her time, and she was probably desired by everyone who viewed her sculpture or who fell under her rule and the king's rule. So that was his motives for behind creating this sculpture, and that's what can be reflected through this sculpture. The next artwork is the screen print of Marilyn Monroe, created by Andy Warhol. Now, Andy Warhol was a famous artist during his time, and I believe his motives were to bring out his own fame while reflecting Marilyn Monroe's fame to everyone who viewed his art. Marilyn Monroe was a figure of beauty during her time. She still is a figure of beauty during today's time. She was also a figure of wealth and fame, and her lifestyle was desired by many people because she was an icon during her time. So on to the next slide. In comparison of these two, they're both figures of beauty. I wouldn't say feminism relates to my topic, just because I could have chosen someone like Elvis Presley to compare and contrast, just because of, he was an icon as well, and he was a figure of wealth and fame during his time. So feminism isn't really involved in this project. However, they both are figures of beauty, and both artists try to exploit their traits, such as an elongated neck in the bust of Nefertiti, or the colors that was used by Andy Warhol to create Marilyn Monroe's portrait. So those things were important in the creation of both of these artworks and tried to convey the message that these two figures were the desired person at the time. I've already touched on how they were icons during their day, so now we're going to go to some contrastions. So under my contrast slide, I have how Nefertiti represented power, while Monroe more represented fame. Now, they both are desired positions during their time. At the time of Marilyn Monroe, many people wanted to be like her. They wanted to look like her and aspire to become at her level of wealth and fame. Same as Nefertiti. Although Nefertiti was probably a bit more focused on spiritual beauty and bringing out fame to the king. However, the motives behind both of them were the same, even if they weren't related in exactly the same way. The materials and the features used to create these two. Now, Marilyn Monroe was a screen print on a cream-colored card, while the bust of Nefertiti was created using stucco-coated limestone. So the materials were very different, and also Marilyn Monroe appears to be more cartoon-like and fictitious, whereas Nefertiti appears to be more alive and more real. Even though her features aren't exactly proportional, she's portrayed as being lifelike. The difference between the two creators, I've already touched on that a little bit, but King Akhenaten wanted to bring about his prized possession and show how he was wealthy and powerful through Nefertiti, and how he contained all of the beauty and all of the wealth and the power during his day. Whereas Andy Warhol looked to exploit his own fame as well, but he did it in a much different way, because he tried to show that he was one of the greatest artists of all time and that he should deserve as much fame and power as Marilyn Monroe did during her time. So that's pretty much the difference between these two. Now, bringing in the third source, Audrey Hepburn is absolutely one of my favorite actresses of all time, so this is why I chose this. This portrait, it's a portrait that was pastel on a paper and that was laid onto board. It was created by Rufino Tamayo. He was of Mexican descent, and he created the portrait of Audrey Hepburn just to show off her beauty. Now, he doesn't really have any motives behind it himself, because he was more intertwined with nature and with art and just expressing his feelings rather than trying to collect power and fame and those kind of things. So he was very different than the other two authors, but he also shows a very powerful figure of her time and a very desirable figure. Now, when I say desirable, I'm talking about how each one of these were desirable as their lifestyles were desirable, their looks were desirable, and their positions were desirable. So I believe it to be all three things, motivated by all three creators and displayed in all three artworks. So back to the overarching goal. Art can reflect a message, just like I said various times before. Each one of these artworks reflects the message of wanting to reach the same status as these three women throughout time, so that way they can gain all of their benefits. The artworks are all inspired by their creators' motives. The one by Audrey Hepburn, his goal was to show her beauty, but like I said, he wasn't as into it as Thutmose doing his work for King Akhenaten and Andy Warhol was. But still, there was some motivation behind all three artworks. In the end, Nefertiti, Monroe, and Hepburn, all of these artworks of these three very beautiful and important women, they all basically demonstrate the desired lifestyle, the desired look, and the desired position of people during that time. They were all icons of their time, which is one of the subjects that we touched on in art history class, and they all displayed all three of these things. So that's all I have for you. I also have a works cited page at the end, which you can take a look at really quickly. And if there are any questions, I would love to hear about them. Feel free to email me at rebeccakinzer@gmail.com, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you guys.